The worst cyclone to hit Western Australia's northwest coast in years tore roofs off homes, submerged cars in the streets of Exmouth, obliterated the airport terminal, and knocked out the gas plants that heat 2 out of every 5 homes in the state, all before breakfast on a Friday morning. 40 people sheltering in an evacuation center held on as roof sheets were ripped off over their heads. 3,000 residents in Exmouth heard windows imploding and sheds disintegrating into the dark. 2,000 homes across the Gascoyne and Midwest lost power. The domestic terminal at Learmonth Airport, gone. Electrical switchboards stripped apart, ceilings collapsed. No passenger flights for the foreseeable future. Gas production at 4 major offshore facilities suspended as Chevron and Woodside raced to pull workers off platforms before 260-kilometer-an-hour gusts made helicopter access impossible. Matthew Nicola, Exmouth's Shire president, surveyed his town when the wind finally dropped and used one word: war zone. This was Cyclone Narelle. Category 4 at landfall near Northwest Cape, gusts touching 260 kilometers an hour near the center. And it did not just hit Western Australia, it crossed 3 states over 12 days, left Katherine flooded twice, and then re-intensified in the Indian Ocean before coming back harder. The storm has weakened now. The emergency declarations are being wound back, but 5 systems are still broken, and one of them feeds gas to half the continent. By the time Narelle made its final approach toward Exmouth, the sequence of destruction was already 12 days old. The system first crossed the Australian coast in far north Queensland as a Category 4, moved west across the Gulf of Carpentaria, then hit the Northern Territory near Cape Shiels as a Category 3 on March 22nd. That was landfall number 2. Only 2 other cyclones in more than 4 decades have achieved 3 separate landfalls across the continent: Ingrid in 2005 and Steve in 2000. Narelle was now tracking to join them. After crossing NT as a tropical low, the system moved offshore, found warm water in the Indian Ocean, and did what meteorologists had warned was possible. It re-intensified. By Thursday, March 26th, it was a Category 4 sitting 365 kilometers northeast of Exmouth and accelerating south at 18 kilometers an hour. At 12 o'clock local time on March 26th, Chevron took the Wheatstone platform offline, 225 kilometers offshore, 8.9 million tons of annual LNG capacity suspended. 3 hours later, at 1500, one of Gorgon's 3 production trains on Barrow Island went down. By that evening, the Northwest Shelf plant near Karratha, Woodside's operation feeding domestic gas to the mainland, had also stopped production. Santos' Varanus Island plant followed. 4 facilities. Together, they had supplied 44% of Western Australia's gas in 2026 up to that point. Gas analyst Jeanette Roberts told ABC the timing was especially bad given wider LNG market strain. What she was referring to was this: Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter, and had already shut down production the same month after Iranian strikes damaged its facilities. Iran had blocked the Strait of Hormuz. The global LNG supply chain was already fractured in 3 places when Narelle added a 4th. At 4 a.m. on March 27th, Narelle was sitting 80 kilometers north of Exmouth, moving fast, gusts at 260 kilometers an hour. In Exmouth, a woman named Carly Lillycrap sheltered at a friend's house with her 2 young children and listened through roller shutters as things flew into the windows. She heard a shed disintegrate nearby. She saw a friend's car disappear underwater. At 160 to 180 kilometers an hour of sustained wind, Matthew Nicola told ABC it was very, very loud and very, very scary, and he could only imagine what was happening in the dark outside. By Friday morning, he could see it. But here's what the numbers actually showed. This was not only a natural disaster, it was a supply chain event wearing the shape of a storm. The gas plants Narelle hit are not scattered across WA's coast by accident. They are concentrated in the Pilbara and Gascoyne because that is where the offshore reservoirs are. a dense cluster of some of the world's largest LNG infrastructure within a few hundred kilometers of each other. Wheatstone sits 225 kilometers offshore. Gorgon is on Barrow Island. The Northwest Shelf plant is at Karratha. Varanus Island Santos domestic gas hub is between them. In normal conditions, that concentration makes Australia the world's second largest LNG exporter. In cyclone conditions, it means one storm track can take out half the domestic supply in a single afternoon. The Dampier to Bunbury natural gas pipeline, the main artery carrying gas from the northwest to Perth, still had pressure in it. Underground storage gave the network some buffer. A total gas blackout was not happening. But gas prices in the Australian domestic market were already elevated before Narelle crossed. With 4 facilities offline simultaneously and no confirmed restoration timeline from Chevron or Woodside, the market entered a period of managed uncertainty that could last days or weeks. Operators said they would resume production once it was safe to do so. Once helicopter crews could reach platforms, once damage assessments were complete, once weather windows allowed remobilization. None of those conditions existed yet. At the same time, in Exmouth, the bore fields had gone dark. In Water Corporation, explained the mechanism plainly. Exmouth's water supply depends on groundwater bore fields that are pumped electrically. When Narelle knocked out power to the bore fields, pumping stopped. Storage tanks began drawing down, and with the town on generator power at best, and repair crews not yet able to reach the full damage extent, Water Corporation issued a conserve water notice for Exmouth and Onslow that would remain in place overnight and into the weekend. In Onslow, the problem was different. A supply main had physically failed. Complex earthworks were required. Tankering support was being arranged. D. Egan, manager of the Beeden Bay Hotel in Onslow, stepped outside after the storm and counted. Fences down, trees across the main street, flooding across the road. Cleanup began immediately. Narelle had hit power, water, aviation, gas, and road access at the same time. 5 systems, 1 storm track. The mechanism was straightforward, and that is what made it so total. Cyclone Narelle was a large system. BOM said it was larger than usual, and its size mattered because it meant the destructive wind field extended far beyond the eye. The official severe wind radius stretched from Exmouth to south of Carnarvon, an 800-kilometer stretch of coastline. Towns that were hundreds of kilometers from the center still received very destructive winds. Denham, Shark Bay, Carnarvon, all inside the warning zone simultaneously. The gas platforms were hit not because they were directly in Narelle's path, but because their offshore locations, 100 to 225 kilometers from the coast, placed them exactly in the corridor where sustained winds exceeded 155 kilometers an hour, the threshold above which helicopter access becomes impossible and offshore platform operations must cease. When Wheatstone came offline at noon on March 26th, it did not just lose LNG export capacity, it lost domestic gas output. The same pipe that fed LNG tankers bound for Japan and South Korea fed the domestic gas network that heated homes and ran industry along the west coast. Wheatstone alone, at full capacity, Shenesh, was producing 8.9 million tons of LNG annually, roughly equivalent to Australia supplying the entire annual gas consumption of Belgium. Gorgon, on Barrow Island, had the modular design advantage: 3 trains, 1 offline, 2 still running. That partial resilience kept some domestic supply flowing through the Gorgon pipeline to the mainland. But Woodside's Northwest Shelf operation, the other anchor of WA's Northwest gas output, was not producing. In Brett Hopkinson's family, at Hill Spring Station in the Gascoyne, none of this infrastructure language mattered yet. Narelle was the worst cyclone his family had ever experienced. His parents' house was gone, roof, veranda, ceiling, and everything. Peter Starr spent the night at an evacuation center in Carnarvon without knowing whether his home or his boat had survived. These were the direct human costs. The gas and port disruption was the systemic one. In the northwest of Australia, the 2 scales are always running at the same time. The northwest coast of Australia has hosted the most intense cyclones on the continent. Exmouth has faced this before. On March 22, 1999, exactly 27 years before Narelle came close to its coastline, Category 5. Cyclone Vance crossed the Exmouth Gulf at maximum intensity. The Learmonth Meteorological Station recorded 267 kilometers an hour, the highest wind gust ever measured in Australia at the time. 70% of Exmouth's buildings sustained severe damage. 110 homes were destroyed. More than 200 others were damaged. A 3.5-meter storm surge hit the shoreline. The damage bill reached 100 million Australian dollars in 1999 dollars. No one died because of adequate warning and the sparsely populated coast. Barry Taylor, a tackle shop manager who lived through Vance, said before Narelle arrived that Exmouth had worked hard to get everything locked down. He said there were people in town who remembered Vance and were the most wary. He was right to say so. This time, the town was still standing. 40 people inside the evacuation center when the roof sheets went, and they held on. A shell service station smashed. Homes with panel damage, flooding, structural failures. But the preparation, the warnings, the early evacuation of tourists from Exmouth and the reef towns, these held the human toll below where it could have been. In the Northern Territory, the scale was different. The Daly River at Nawayu rose past 16.25 meters, the previous record set in 1998, making this the worst flood on record for that region. Communities around Daly River, Palumpa, Jilkmingen, and Woogalar were isolated long after the storm had moved on. Jilkmingen residents were still being returned home by four-wheel drive bus on March 28th because the road was still the gatekeeper. In Katherine, the hospital was closed. A portable field hospital was set up. The river peaked just above the major flood level of 17.5 meters at the town bridge. For Katherine, this was the second flooding event in a month. Narelle had flooded the town twice in 30 days. As of this recording, 2,000 homes remain without power across Exmouth, Carnarvon, and Mulloway, with Horizon Power saying some restoration may take an extended period. Exmouth's airport terminal has no regular passenger flights and no confirmed timeline for resumption. Water Corporation says low pressure will persist in Exmouth and Onslow while bore fields are restored and Onslow's main is repaired. And 4 of WA's major gas facilities are still offline, with helicopter access still constrained by sea state and wind. The Dampier to Bunbury pipeline is holding. Underground storage is buffering. The gas is not gone, not yet, but the margin between functioning and constrained is narrow, and it is being held by storage that was never designed to carry this load for an extended period. Jeanette Roberts' warning was quiet and precise. The timing was especially bad. She was not describing a catastrophe. She was describing a system already under strain from the Middle East. Qatar offline, the Strait blocked, absorbing another hit at the worst possible moment. WA's gas infrastructure was not built with this kind of compound global scenario in mind. The platforms were built for regional isolation, not simultaneous multi-theater disruption. Narelle arrived at the intersection of those two things. The storm is weakening now, moving inland, the emergency declarations unwinding one by one, but the gas platforms cannot be restarted by a press release. The bore fields need power before they pump. The airport terminal needs a construction crew before it carries passengers. And the communities along 800 kilometers of coastline are cleaning up rubble that used to be service stations and roofs and verandas. The question is not if another system finds this corridor. The question is when.